What Your Bank Doesn't Tell You, a podcast by You Mushroom.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, What Your Bank Doesn't Tell You. Today, we have the big honor and the big pleasure to have as a guest an author, Cecile Biccari. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and you've written an amazing book about money, a book for children, something which is really missing on the market generally. And the book is called Your Money and the World. It exists in 3 languages. In German, it's called Dein Geld und die Welt. And we also have it in French, C'est ton argent.
That's right. That's the advantage of publishing in Switzerland. You right away get 3 languages.
That's very true. Cecile, I'm so impressed by your CV and by your expertise and experience. You started 25 years ago in the sustainable industry, back then where no one was talking about sustainability. And you started your career in the Business Council for Sustainable Development, in the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Would you like to say some few words about your professional experience?
Sure. I started in this space a bit by luck, but it was so intuitive to me that this made sense, that we had to try and combine a long-term perspective with all the challenges that we were confronted with in terms of environmental, social challenges, and our idea to create value and grow. So I was lucky to start my career in that space, and then very quickly I sort of shifted my focus to the finance industry after a couple of years at the World Business Council, because I realized, there's only so much the companies can do in terms of having a long-term perspective and a long-term growth strategy if the financial markets are not supporting that long-term vision. So if there's pressure from the financial markets to deliver only short-term profits, then it's very hard for companies to prioritize also some longer-term value creation initiatives. And so that's why I switched to finance, and I spent the next 15 years in finance, working more with investors to understand, okay, how do we use this sustainability information? How do we bring it into investment decisions? Fast forward, there was a lot of education projects also along the way to train investment professionals to understand this. And then my children were born, and then they grew up and they started asking questions as well. And then I realized, the young generation also needs to understand this. So education's kind of became a big part of what I've done to try and combine these concepts of money and impact and responsibility. And now I'm working more with a Swiss foundation, with the Ethos Foundation, to train the Swiss pension funds and the board of trustees to also understand this. So I think we need to tackle it almost at all levels. It's us as individual investors, institutional investors, those responsible for our pensions, the younger generation that's growing up in this world. So trying to sort of align everyone's understanding a bit around these topics.
It's impressive, and as you say correctly, we have to work on every level, and education is actually key for that, because financial education is generally missing in any school system across Europe, starting early on, and it's probably not only across Europe. And knowing the nature of money, knowing the fact that you actually have control over your money and you need to be mindful how you invest, how you spend it, is probably the first step towards sustainable world. And it's so impressive. I keep having this discussion. I was raised in a different generation, and we kind of naturally had a lot of sustainability around back then, because the industrial degree was not, it was still here, but we didn't have so much plastic, we didn't have so much aluminium packed products, so much fast consumption goods and, semi-ready meals, etc. But I'm impressed already what the educational system here in Switzerland does amazingly is when we go, for example, in a supermarket to buy vegetables, my kids are very vocal about not using plastic packages. And it's impressive. It starts already early and it goes in the right direction.
Yeah, and as you said, the awareness around sustainability has increased a lot over the last 20 years.
Yes.
And now it's way more known about and discussed, and there's a lot around discussions around, how can we live more sustainable lifestyles? But we don't often talk about the financial dimension of sustainability and how our financial choices also have a sustainability impact. So that's also a little bit what I was trying to do with this book.
It's amazing, and you already answered my next question. Why did you write the book? Was there a moment actually which triggered you to say, okay, now I'm going to write it? Because normally an idea kind of goes through a process. Would you mind sharing with us?
Sure. I think it was bubbling a bit under the surface because my kids were starting to ask questions, and it was a topic at home. And of course, they were trying to understand also a bit, what I do during the day. But also, they were just generally asking more questions around money. I think around that age, 6, 7, they were becoming aware, and it could be just very innocent questions a bit, but it sort of reveals that they have an interest in the topic. So my son, who'd be like 6 years old at the time, he saw me pay, coming out of one of the shops, pay by card. And I think for them, it's magic. It's like this little piece of plastic that you can just swipe and then you just walk away with things. And he just looked up at me and he was like, "Mom, when you die, can I have the card?"
Oh my
and
God.
I was like, "Yeah, but first you need to understand a couple of things. We're going to have a chat about, money and responsibility and impact. But, somewhere down the line, sure, you're going to have your own money." And it made me realize that, the interest is there, but you need to start building some knowledge. And then what was interesting as well is that, typically if I want to have a conversation about a new topic with my children, I look for good books because I find often, we can read a story. It gives us a little bit of a base for a conversation, something. And for them, it sort of captures their imagination a bit. It brings some key concepts, some ideas, and then we can discuss it. And on the topic of money, I just couldn't find anything, hardly anything on the market. And certainly nothing for that age group or that really combined financial education, how to manage your money with more of a sustainability impact. There were a few good things out there, but so few that it really made me realize we need more. There's probably a big gap in this market. And when I started researching a bit the space, the other thing that struck me is this idea that actually, the research shows that it is around the age of 7 that the kids start to form their own notion of what money is about and their own relationship with money. And they might do that very subconsciously, but this relationship they're building with the idea of money, it starts around that age and it's going to influence them for the rest of their lives. So we do need to engage with them on that topic and have conversations with them on that topic, because otherwise they just absorb a little bit of things that float around them in their environment, but it might be a little bit biased one way or the other, or it might not give them the full picture of what's possible.
You're absolutely right, and I think it's very important to create a conscious way to deal with money already from early age on. And I very much love the way you've written the book, because it's very educative, it's very playful, and it's very intuitive to develop a relationship to notions which are quite abstract, actually. Money, spending, investing, a bank. These are things which we cannot really, and particularly now, our generation would run around with coins and banknotes, but now everything is electronic, it's a twin. And you don't have these tangible aspects towards money, which our generation partially used to have. I still remember, for example, my first, it wasn't a piggy bank, it was actually saving, how shall I call it, a saving pot, a metal one, very beautiful one. And I still remember putting one coin after the other, and you're right, it actually started around the age of 7. And it was a very interesting perception that I'm doing something which is going to continue and I'm going to see the result one day. It also disciplines children. When was your first conscious contact with money where you realized, that's money, that's what is?
I think when I started working, and I was quite, childhood memories probably, of course, there's some, but I wouldn't say that they were conscious in the sense of I could feel the responsibility connected to money. I think when I started working, which I was lucky to start quite young, I was 21 when I started the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, so I didn't didn't study years and years. I was keen to get started in the job market, and I always remember my father was telling me, one day you'll be financially independent, and when I received my first paycheck, around 20, that you have a sense of freedom and you have a sense of responsibility at the same time, right? And I think that was for me the first moment where I was like, okay, I'm a grown up now.
I also remember this feeling when I received my first salary, and it was a very beautiful feeling because you feel entitled and empowered because you need to make a budgeting, think of how much it's going to go for renting, how much it's going to go. My case was also around that age as you, and was super. I also remember this moment exactly as you describe it, when you're feeling, okay, now I'm grown up, now I'm independent.
But I think the whole point is exactly that somehow you learn then on the go as you get older and as you have more exposure. But it was interesting to me that actually this was never part of my education prior to starting to work. And we never really had, whether, in the schools or at home, sort of structured conversation around money to explain to you, what your options will be, what your responsibilities might be, what it's going to mean for you from the different perspective of, what will happen to the money, what will happen in terms of the impact on the world, what will happen in terms of your own goals, your personal goals. And all these notions, they weren't very present or explained in a sort of clear way. They were obviously floating around us, I think, in the general culture that you grew up with, but they weren't so, they weren't explained.
And it forms, as you say, same in the household I grew up at home. What was very interesting is you kind of form subconscious beliefs around money without, as you say, realizing it, putting in a structured content, pronouncedly talking about them. I remember I grew up with two very interesting perceptions of money, because part of the household where I grew up, they were very oriented towards saving and, this scarcity perception. There is not enough of money. You need to save. You need to not to be a spendthrift, be mindful, rather put something aside, etc., etc. And luckily, there were also some of the people who influenced me in my family environment who would also from time to time, enjoy also a fun element or spend a little bit for fun, etc. But the predominant feeling was saving. And it's very interesting how that forms a person all your way along until you get conscious about that. And I absolutely agree with you. It's very important to start early enough with the children around this age, as you say, 7, 8, 9. Talk proactively with them about money. Explain to them what is investing, what is spending, particularly the concept where money comes from. I keep telling my sons, I'm not the Swiss National Bank. We don't print money. It's like, there is enough, but you need to also kind of learn to manage a little bit your expenditures, because this generation, of course, in the country where we live, and we are blessed with a lot of financial freedom. Most of the people live a decent life, luckily, and this notion that, money is around is a good thing, but also, as you correctly say, it comes with a responsibility.
Yeah, and I think, the idea that there's more than these two options of spending and saving.
Exactly.
Because often as kids, you grow up, it's really when the money topic comes up, that's a little bit the binary choice that you feel you have. Your parents probably will tell you, don't spend too much, or when you spend, think about certain things before you spend, put some money aside, and it's a little bit these two choices you have. But ultimately, to introduce them to the concept of investment early on, I think it gives them the ability to understand the fundamentals, grow up with the notion that this can be done, and so become more confident about it for later in life. So it becomes a little bit less scary as well, and less technical, or it feels less like it's reserved.
It's a must and a heavy thing. I very much like, and if you allow, I'm going to take the book. I'll take the first one, the German one. What I love a lot about is how you structured it. And you start with what is money and why do we need it? Because it's we kind of take it as a natural, but it's not given that we know why do we need money. And because we were speaking about spending and investing, you're right. Typically, we would know this too. You either spend or you invest. But there is something very beautiful which you introduce, and this is also giving money for charity.
Yeah.
And this is typically not taught in, nowadays, yes. But our generation, I remember my household, my grandparents would always say, like, you always put certain amount and give it to people who are less wealthy. But I wasn't aware that this was the common rule. Nowadays we do it, of course. But I very much love the structure that you give much more option than investing, spending, and than this to investing or spending.
Yeah, that's the idea. That was the idea. Was a little bit the key concept behind the book was to give the kids like a little bit of an internal compass about what their choices are and also what they need to think about when they make those choices. So, and the choices are around, the different options that are available to them. Of course, saving, spending, and then investing and donating. I had gambling as well in the very beginning.
That's very nice.
But that didn't quite make it into the book in the end. But basically, you have these choices about what you can do with your money, but in whichever way you decide to go, there's probably like 3 dimensions that you want to think about. And one is, the financial dimension, what's going to happen with the money, short term, long term, if you spend it, if you save it, if you invest it, if you donate it, different results. What's going to happen in terms of your personal satisfaction, happiness, your own personal goals, what are you trying to achieve? Are you going to get a jolt of happiness right away if you're spending? Are you going to be able to reach some of your other long-term goals if you're saving or investing? Or are you going to be able to make someone else happy through donating, which can be equally powerful as spending on yourself sometimes, because you realize that, you're sharing something and it has an impact. And that third dimension of generally impact is the one that also runs across all of these options. Whatever we choose to do with our money, there might be different types of impacts on the world, on the environment, on people. And you can sort of try and factor that into your thinking as well. And the idea was the book is to give the kids this kind of intuitive framework in their mind, like a decision-making tool that helps them navigate then in their lives, to say, okay, I know that I have a spectrum of options, and the different options I can activate, but I have to think about these 3 dimensions as I go through my choices. And it can be a bit, abstract and a bit technical, but that's also why the story is built around like a little mouse that helps this little girl figure out what to do with her treasure. It's a treasure management expert that comes along to help her out, and it's trying to be as kind of adventurous and imaginative as possible to make it more fun for the kids.
It's amazingly structured, and it really starts like a fairy tale in a very good way. And I very much love the expression treasure management, Schatzwirtschaft. It's actually a very good way to describe what we call Volkswirtschaft in German. It's much more to the point, because it's exactly how do you manage your treasures. And do you spend something immediately because you need to cover immediate needs? Do you put something aside because you want to have it one day and let it grow? Or do you give, as you say? And it's also
or a combination of all of them.
A combination, of course, of it. And it disciplines a person in a very good way. And I think dealing with money.
Yeah, and honestly, I was so frustrated that so many children's books end with finding a treasure, and then you never know what they do with the treasure. So that was also for me like, okay, let's make that the starting point, and just explore all the different options that are available.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about how the storytelling goes? I think it's a very good way also to portray a very intuitive way to money.
Yeah, so the story, the book is in 2 parts. It has a comic strip introduction, which is a little bit the story, and that's supposed to be a little bit to make it fun and relatable for the kids. And then the second part of the book is more kind of a documentary educational book. So then it goes through a lot of like kind of questions that might be on children's mind and attempts to give them element of answers and plant a lot of different seeds about concepts that hopefully they can then take with them as they grow up. And so that second part of the book, the more kind of serious educational part, also looks at two different aspects. It looks at the personal level, money in our lives, but also money in the world, like the role of money in the world, in society, the origins of money, why did we even invent it, and is it still fulfilling its purpose? So yeah, it's designed to be for kids that are from around 7 years old up until 11 plus, because they can pick up different things from it at different ages. The story is more, give you some notions, and then the second half, kind of, you go a little bit more deeply into some of the concepts. Yeah, and there's a little mouse that just helps you along the way, and that little mouse is the treasure management expert, is a little bit your guide in navigating the space, but it's also in a way, ultimately your inner voice then, right? Your own resource when you start to feel comfortable with the topic, and that you can trust and you can make choices, as you said, confidently and intuitively, because you understand your options and you understand the impacts. So that's the idea, is that it grows to be your own little inner financial advisor.
That is a very nice expression. Your inner voice is your inner financial advisor. I like it a lot, and it's pretty much to the point what we need to cultivate in our children if we want them to make an impact. And we always say in our company, when we talk about money also, that money has a voice, and that it's very important that we are aware how we express the voice of the money, and ultimately goes at a grown-up stage, not in the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, but later on. The earlier we start, we also build up the concept of one's own worth.
Mm-hmm.
Know your worth is the motto of our movement, and it is so essential to have the feeling that you can co-shape the world the way you want. And money is one of the resources which we have, right? We have the physical resources, the mental and intellectual resources, the emotional resources. And then the third big part, our money, and we can contribute. You can co-shape the world the way we want to see it one day, and move away from this perception, oh my God, it's happening to me, I'm not part of it, I'm kind of vulnerable to what's happening. No, we can co-shape it early on and be very proactive about it. If your 7-year-old would ask you today, Cecile, what is money for you? What would be your answer?
My answer is that, it's a tool to, it gives us, it opens up option, it can empower us to do certain things. It's not a goal in itself. It's a tool to achieve some of our goals, for sure. Our goals can be very different, and they can combine in different ways, and they can have multiple facets to them. They're not. It's not just one single goal, but there might be different things that we're trying to achieve. It could be invest in ourselves, invest in our own education, have enough to have more free time and the luxury of spending time with the people we love. So it's not all material things that money is trying to deliver, but it certainly has a role to play to help us achieve our goals. And there's a responsibility attached to it in how we manage it. So it's a superpower.
It's a very nice expression. It's really a superpower. And luckily we live in a time where we all, at least in Europe, have access to really create money, build wealth for us and our families. And do you talk with your kids also about investing?
Yes, we started that conversation as well. And again, just looking a bit more at the fundamentals to start off with. So what does it mean in practice? And for them to understand that essentially you're using your superpower, your money, to support a good idea, maybe. It could be your own good idea, or it could be someone else's good idea. And you're going to try with your financing, with your investments, to help that idea grow. Now, in an idea, in return, you're hoping that this idea will play out well, it'll be successful, and you'll get some money back, and probably more than you lent or invested to start off with. So we're really going with the fundamentals to start off with, to understand that behind investment there's a notion of value creation. What creates value? What does a good idea look like? So with very small examples that are at their level. You can show them the principles of investment or creating value by showing them if they buy ingredients and bake a cake and then sell the cake at a certain price, they can have a margin and a return on investment. So showing them a little bit all these mechanisms of where value creation is. And we don't talk yet too much about, financial products and investment products.
Probably early,
but more about, understanding exactly, knowing what could look like an interesting investment opportunity. In the book, we have the example of the slime park, because all the kids love slime.
Yes.
And so we said, okay, well, when the little girl has a chance to invest her money, immediately she comes up with that idea that, with a friend of hers, they should open up this big slime park and it will be so much fun. Except it turns out to be a complete disaster because the kids are full of slime and everything is just dirty and it's just not working out. So it's to give them a sense that not every investment will, play out. There's some risks attached to it, but you can, and there's also loads of different mechanisms that you can use to invest, either directly, indirectly. So it's building layers of understanding around what's possible.
Very interesting. We also have this conversation at home. Started 2 years ago, and I think it's around the age 14 with the older one, when they start realizing, and it was exactly the crypto hype. So some of the kids were with 14, 15 would, with their parents, try to test investments in crypto. And I remember we talk regularly, and my older one started investing. His first, lucky him, purchase was NVIDIA. Together, I bought it for him. But, they're passionate game players. And it's very interesting how we seldom do the connection that whatever we use in everyday life is actually a form of investment. There is a company who is producing that. So in our case, it was, I just asked my older one 2 years ago, I was like, well, you spend so much time in front of social media. I would love you to do something to consider. If you're doing that, what company would you pick up for you to invest in? He goes like, looking at his monitor, and with big green letters, you have like NVIDIA, written NVIDIA on the back of it. Let's go NVIDIA. And that's how it started. Super interesting how intuitive actually it could be, because
to connect the dots between the real world and also the investment opportunities, and guide them a little bit in that direction. And I love, the book, is one way to communicate some key concepts and have a conversation and have a dialogue with the parents. But there's so many other great tools to help build awareness and understanding. What you're doing around gamified, portfolios to help kids maybe understand, how to manage a portfolio of stocks before it becomes too real, and more from a sort of a gaming perspective that they find, exciting to engage with. I think those are great tools to help build their skill sets generally across this space.
Yes, and to move to, as you say, to introduce gamification and lightness in the topic. What I love a lot about a book in this age also about money is that money is still in a lot of families, in a lot of places, it's taboo to talk about. And when you have a book about that, when you put it in the world out there, you kind of also take away a little bit the taboo, or to big extent the taboo about the topic. And as you say, even if it's not a taboo, families don't proactively address that. So providing a book, providing apps as ours, as educational programs, it's a huge step for children to make them really ultimately actually more free individuals.
Yeah, and I think it is designed for all generation at the end of the day, because realistically we're trying to address this challenge with the new generation, but as you rightly said, our generation didn't necessarily benefit from it. This wasn't a topic that was much talked about. So we don't necessarily feel equipped as parents to have that discussion with our own children, because we've also just learned on the go, and we don't feel like we have, maybe the full picture and the full understanding of what's possible to guide them in that space. So I think it's the book's designed for the kids, but it also hopefully helps the parents give them a map of the opportunity set that's available to them.
I absolutely agree. It's a book for everyone. It's already very interesting. When I was reading it, it made me rethink. How was I raised about money? What happened? And I think for us grown-ups, for us parents, it's also a very beautiful opportunity in the dialogue with our children to become conscious about our own attitude to money, our own beliefs, and our own needs, how we can develop further this ultimately attitude, which
and that we are
towards
still
money.
learning as well, and we
Yes.
learn alongside them. So it's also a journey that we can take on together somehow. I think
Yes.
we can experiment together. We had with donation. It was interesting. Also, with my daughter, we decided we want to experiment a little bit with donating. But we have to really figure out what to donate for and how to contribute. And she ended up doing a sort of a fundraising for UNICEF at the time of
Wow.
her birthday party. Because
Amazing.
UNICEF has this great initiative that they do, the Sternenwoche in Switzerland, so where all children can help raise money towards UNICEF programs.
Wow.
And so that's amazing. You can use the opportunity of an event that celebrates you to do something fun with your friend that helps raise money. In their case, they did like a choreography and then a dance for the
Oh.
parents. And the parents sort of donated it a little bit when they picked up the kids at the end of the birthday party. And then she could collect that money, send it to UNICEF, and receive back from UNICEF a letter telling her what her money has been used towards and how many children it's helped in Bangladesh with access to water and
Wow.
sanitation. And it was in the thousands of children. So the impact was massive. And to realize that with so little money on our side and a little bit of effort, she could have such a great impact, I think in the end was also, a big part of what made her day a bit special that day.
Wow.
And we learned
Impressive.
together. So it's just something you explore with what the new opportunities are also as you try and find them for your kids, right?
Well, this is very impressive and it teaches an amazing lessons because we here in our geographical part of the world are very privileged and have pretty much everything we need. We have a roof above our head, we have hot and cold water, clean water, access to schools. Our kids can walk on the street without being, endangered, etc. And only some few flying hours away from here, the reality is completely different. And we keep forgetting that actually more than 50% of the population of the world lives with less than $5 a day. So it's a very powerful lessons which they've got with this.
It's giving them a little bit of reality check, a bit of perspective, and they're helping them realize that they're privileged and we're very lucky. But they can play a meaningful role also to improve, to shape the world, to shape the future. They can feel empowered with their own decisions at their own level, and everyone can have an influence. So I think if they become aware of that and they want to exercise their own superpower at their own level, that all adds up, and that can make a bigger difference at the end.
It's very, very, very beautiful thought and idea. We're talking the whole time about our own personal relationship about money and building it already from early age on. What would be your final advice you would give to us parents when it comes to raising our kids in awareness of money?
I think that's a tough one because there's not one advice, but
what would you
learn
practice yourself?
Yeah, to think of it as really a journey, like a learning journey. Start small and with small amounts, but stay with the topic because it's a topic that affects your whole life and it keeps coming up. And so it's one thing to have some notions and some ideas and some concepts. Hopefully the book helps with that. But really it's practice afterwards. And everyday little decisions can be an opportunity to discuss this again, whether it's choosing whether it's obviously some situation where you're in shops with your children, or situation where you're making choices about how to use your money, even planning a holiday and making decisions with a budget for the holiday, whether it's looking at, Christmas time and receiving gifts, but also maybe giving gifts and how you can do both. And then, of course, looking at, investment opportunities and starting small and finding new solutions to make your first steps in that space and to learn by doing, and not be afraid to start early, make some mistakes when things are not at a very high stake yet, because that helps you build your confidence and your intuition for making decisions later. I think what's much more difficult is when you've never really practiced, than to take that what feels like a giant step later in life. Start small, keep at it, and keep practicing.
I absolutely agree with that. It's true. And we're very lucky also that technology helps here, and kids can start with very little practice and experience. What is it to spend, to invest, to donate? You don't have to start immediately with huge amounts. And as you say, it develops your instincts and trains. I think this is a beautiful closing message, and it's a beautiful advice to everyone out there who thinks, what is it, the way, how can I start the journey for in awareness about money?
Yeah, and if you're giving them a piggy bank at some point, maybe think about having 4.
Yes.
And they can split the money right from the very beginning, to learn to have a spending pot, a saving pot, a small investment pot, and a donating pot. And
I love this idea.
Play around with different pots.
It's a very beautiful idea, really, and it's warmly recommended. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Cecile. It was a real inspiration to talk to you. Thank you for your time and sharing your wisdom, experience, and this beautiful book which you've created. It's a huge pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Nora. Thanks.
Cecile, we have a new tradition in our podcasts, and we give the opportunity to our guests to ask a question to our next guest in the podcast. So what would be your question to our next guest?
I think, depending who's coming along, but I think what I find fascinating is sort of how we could potentially reinvent the narrative around money and some of the models that we use to explain how the world works. And particularly, we talk a lot about sustainability and finance, but economics is also the space behind all of this. We still have economics model that direct a little bit how we think about value creation. Are those still appropriate? Do we need to think about regenerative economics? What would that look like? So that for me is like a really interesting space to rethink. And how do we teach that in school or at universities differently?
Oh, that's a perfect question for our next guest. I think he's going to be very happy to hear it. Thank you very much. And it's really, I think, one of the major questions fundamentally currently in our economic development.
Well, I look forward to the answers.
Me too. Well, dear guests and listeners, and thank you very much for your attention. It's been a pleasure. And we are going to continue with our next series, What Your Bank Doesn't Tell You. As always, you can always ask us questions in hello@youmushroom.com. Looking forward to reading them and answering them. And if you have questions for our next guest along the lines which Cecile was just mentioning, please don't hesitate to post them. Goodbye.
Money!
What Your Bank Doesn't Tell You, a podcast by You Mushroom.